The mountains may shake when the waters rise, but we will not be afraid. So, we read this one more time. It's two short verses. The earth may fall apart. The mountains may fall into the middle of the sea, but we will not be afraid. The waters of the sea may roar and foam. The mountains may shake when the waters rise, but we will not be afraid. Salah. Let's tag these two verses from this sermonic thought. God is in it with you. Would you just tell a neighbor, it's probably the only time I'm going to say this, would you just look at a neighbor and say, neighbor, God is in it with you. You may be seated in the presence of God. Let's give God some praise if you believe God is in it with you. Written during a very difficult time in the experience of the children of Israel, the sons of Korah reminds us that although the earth be removed and the mountains fall into the sea, that we ought not be afraid. With such calamity in its written day, we too face similar calamities in our current day as well. The sons of Korah make such implications upon the text that leaves its readers to imagine whether these calamities are literal, allegorical, theological, governmental, financial, metaphorical, or perhaps fiction. That you as a believer ought not fear the worst of times, whatever those times may hold, because God is in it with you. The earth being removed, according to the authors of the text, seems to suggest to us today the reality of the temporal. That nothing under the heavens were created to last for an eternity. Taken literally, the earth will give way to non-existence. That one day earth, as we know, will cease to exist. And John the Revelator has reminded us that there will be a new heaven and a new earth. Perhaps the sons of Korah have taken an allegorical approach to the earth being removed, simply suggesting to us that the earth is symbolic of human beings and real characters. That one day we all will be removed to our final state of residence, whether that is in heaven or in hell. Perhaps the sons of Korah are not suggesting the text be taken from a literal or allegorical stance, but a theological one. Meaning that God is the orchestrator of this created catastrophe and gives evidence that the Creator still reigns as majesty of his creation. If not literal, allegorical, theological, then perhaps governmental. That the text is tailored to teach us today that our governing systems, whether that be local, state, national, or worldwide, is likened unto the earth that will be removed into the sea. That homelessness will affect the lives of millions. That persons will be underqualified for some jobs and overqualified for others. That banks will no longer guarantee funds, or credit bureaus no longer have final authoritative decision powers. Although the earth be removed, literal, allegorical, theological, governmental, financial, or metaphorically, that it should not be taken fictionally. Geologists, biologists, and other scientists have long debated the sustainability and possibility of the removal of the earth. That some scientists suggest that due to the human disregard of care and concern for the longevity of our planet, that earth itself is in jeopardy of death. That our greed and desire to want and have has created excess waste that has caused an undesired pollution upon the planet. That our obesity levels coupled with our wastefulness has caused the earth to bear unintended weight that has placed a strain on its gravitational pull. That our production of toxins and pollutants has filled the atmosphere with poisonous gases that could create an event of acid rain. The refusal to be committed to go green efforts has caused a lack of greenery reproduction to sustain oxygen levels that will be the balance of life between plants and people. That polar ice caps are melting at unprecedented levels, threatening the earth to be flooded with waters that no human technology and efforts can make. That the environmental shift has temporarily suspended the normality of wildlife nature, where polar bears are not breeding at all, which may result in the extinction of this mammal. That our affinity and desire for foods like shrimp, crab legs, lobster tails, tilapia, salmon, and other sea life has called wars upon the oceans, where fishermen are accused of overfishing the deep blue seas, and the marine life has fallen into states of instability. Though the earth be removed could suggest that all things, literally, allegorically, theologically, governmentally, financially, will eventually fail. And not only on global levels, but personal levels as well. Some of those who say they love you today will eventually hate you tomorrow. Some of those that are your friends, your comrades, your aces, your partners, your homies today will undoubtedly be your worst enemies tomorrow. That the earth will be removed, where love is no longer love. Friendship is no longer friendship. Security becomes insecurity. Permanency becomes temporal. Up becomes down. Right becomes wrong. In becomes out. Out becomes in. Thick becomes thin. Metaphorically been depicted before our very eyes. TV shows like The Blacklist, Criminal Minds, NCIS, CSI, and Quantico that captures the views of millions as criminals and violators are highlighted as stars. Shows like Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, The Game, that embellish scandalous behavior to get whatever they want. Desperate Housewives, NBA Wives, Real Housewives of Atlanta, Orange County, and New York that depict women who may not even be wives at all, that fight over the limelight and riches of their significant others. There are even gossip shows like The View, Wendy Williams, TMZ, and Extra that hire paparazzi to invade the privacy of celebrities only to report their flaws and whereabouts to a gossip-greedy audience. The have and the have-nots whose climax and focal point is following the complicated dynamic between the rich and the powerful. Although the earth can be removed, has 21st century implications that should not remind us often that this world is not our home. This earth has become a different world. And because of its sinful state of constant slipping away from God, it has been removed. The Sons of Korah also gives us further implications that not only is the earth being removed, but the mountains are falling or slipping away into the sea. Whether that's literal, allegorical, theological, governmental, financial, or metaphorical, it behooves its readers to investigate its interpretation. Perhaps this clause is suggesting that those who have lived on the peaks of life, those who have enjoyed the views of high places, those who consider themselves to be at an altitude higher than common persons, or those who have hid themselves from the communal of fellowship will all be exposed when the mountains start tilting towards the sea. If it's literal, then consider the continuous mountain slides that we witness in the state of California, where million-dollar homes are being swept away like meaningless dirt into the awaiting waters and sinkholes. My brothers and sisters, if it's allegorical, then consider the persons who have had major influences in this world, like Bernard Madoff, who almost single-handedly crashed the entire Wall Street market with a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. If it's theological, then the Bible tells us that the rich shall be made poor, the exalted shall be brought down, and the high shall be made low. If it's governmental, then consider the administration of George W. Bush, who after 8 years inheriting a $3 trillion surplus from Bill Clinton, turns around and hands a $3 trillion deficit to Barack Obama. The mountains are being carried away into the seas. Consider the Sarah Palins and Senator John McCain's that intently and aggressively stirred up racism again in our country when a black man decided to lead these yet to be United States of America. Consider the remarks and slander made by the Tea Party, who funded campaigns to depict drawings of a monkey on the loose in the White House. Or perhaps most recently, the undermined, Russian rigged and influenced election of a known racist yet billionaire businessman who vowed to return this country to a state of hatred and hideous crimes, perpetuated false advertisements, and habitual narcissistic, pusillanimous, and pathological liar by branding his campaign "Make America Great Again." The mountains are being carried away into the sea. Or perhaps it's metaphorical to explain to us that the earth can no longer maintain that which she has given birth to. That the mountains are only rooted because of the security of the earth. That the mountains are only able to stand tall because of the undergirding of the earth. That the carpets of green grass, bushes, and trees are only able to decorate the mountains because of the nutrients that are provided by the earth. And since the earth has been removed, consequently, the mountains are also being swept into the seas. This should remind us that we operate in duplicity. When at times we operate as the earth, and at other times we operate as the mountains. Consider your own household, that you as the breadwinner, the sustainer of bills and responsibility, must maintain a posture of security because you have mountains called children who are intricately dependent upon you. And if you fail as the provider, then consequently those mountains that depend on you will fail as well. Consider yourself as a leader, that you are responsible for the successes and failures of your followers. And if you as the earth be removed, then consequently those mountains called people will utterly fail as well. This dichotomy depicts a deposit of deprivation, where we learn that there must be a stronger entity that can sustain both the earth and the mountains. And that there must be another option, that even when we grow weary of being the earth, or even when we can no longer be dependent as mountains, that there is another sustainer that keeps all of us, whether dependent or independent, from falling into the sea. So the sons of Korah writes this text to teach us that we ought not be afraid, because we have a God who is our security and safety in insecure times. A God who is our strength in times of weakness. A God who is our support in times of need. A God who is our salvation in times of trouble. And if God can handle issues on a universal level, if God can handle issues on a global level, if God can handle issues on a national level, if God can handle issues on a local level, then surely God can handle issues on a personal level. I am convinced, my brothers and sisters, according to the text, that we should not fear whatever is circumventing around us, because God is in it with us. Whether that's literal, allegorical, theological, governmental, financial, or metaphorical, I stand under the sworn oath of the Holy Writ, according to the text of Psalms 46, 2 and 3, to tell somebody today that God is in it with you. And just in case God doesn't stop the earth from being removed, or the mountains from being carried into the sea, He is faithful enough to get into the situation with you. What are the situations that God will get in with us? How can a God with such significance, with all His splendor and glory, reduce Himself to fit into our seamless and insignificant human affairs? Is God really ready to help me with my situations? Is God really willing to help me in my circumstances? Is God really able to sustain me and deliver me from my pitiful plight of perish? I stand again on the promises of God to affirm to you today that God is ready, willing, and able to sustain you, keep you, and deliver you from your situation. Those situations where friendships are failing because of those most trivial affairs. Those situations where your finances have become fickle because of the instability of the economy. Those situations where the report of your health has become a horror story and doctors are confused about your future. Those situations of mundane marriages where you find yourself with your spouse for the sake of just being married. Those situations where even relatives have become ruthless and water seems thicker than blood. Those situations of hypocritical church members who will stone you for your sin while simultaneously sweeping their own mud under the rug. Those situations where you have found yourself growing weary in the workplace, working a job that seems to have no means to an end. Those situations where you question whether or not you are supposed to be alive and yet to discover your own creative purpose. Those situations of asking yourself, why me, Lord, after all the good you have done and the love you have shown towards others. Yes, God will get in those situations with you. I'm trying to keep it together. God will run with you until you feel as if you can't run another lap. He'll walk with you until you feel like collapsing by the wayside. And then he'll carry you when you don't have enough strength to carry yourself. I'm going to say that one more time. I said God will run with you until you feel as if you can't run another lap. He'll walk with you until you feel like collapsing by the wayside. And then he'll carry you when you don't have enough strength to carry yourself. I need to remind somebody at the Sunset Baptist Church that God is in it with you. And be further reminded, my brothers and sisters, that God is just not in it with you when you have the more. But he's faithful enough to be in it with you when you have the less. I said God is just not in it with you when you have the more. But he's faithful enough to be in it when you have the less. Just when you have become friendless, God will get in it with you. Just when you become motherless, God will get in it with you. Just when you become fatherless, God will get in it with you. Even when you become brotherless or sisterless or spouseless or childless or jobless or churchless, careless or careless, homelessness or helpless, let me reaffirm you to those of you that are listening and feel as if you belong to the less crowd. God is in it with you. My brothers and sisters, allow me to suggest to you a remedy that the old church was singing in a hymn when times as such seemed to strike their ranks, when it appeared as though the earth was falling apart and the mountains were slipping into the sea. Instead of becoming afraid, they would simply sing this song. They would sing the song whose lyrics said, I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses. And the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the joy, come on, we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I don't profess or confess that I know what all of your troubles are and seem to be. I don't have telepathic powers that allow me to tap into your very real realities. My powers are suspended to the limitations of my own human frailties. I am not God. I cannot do all things. I don't know what tomorrow may hold, but I do know who holds tomorrow. That my confidence, my faith, my reassurance that God is still in control of it all. So let the earth fall apart. We have a God who's powerful enough to cause matter to become non-existent, and then a God who's faithful enough to catch us before we fall. Let the mountains fall into the sea. We have a God who not only walked with us in high places, but a God who is also faithful enough to walk with us in the valley. And as one good turn deserves another, so does one good psalm. And the good sister psalm to Psalms 46 is Psalms 24. And it says, the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas, and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his own soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive the blessing from the Lord, and righteousness from God of his salvation. This generation is a generation of them that seek him. Seek his face, O Jacob and Salah. Lift up your heads, O ye gates. Let me try it again. Lift up your heads, members of Said, and be lifted up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye members of Sunset, and even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Now we ought to be convinced, no matter how atrocious our adversaries are, or how brutal our battles are, or how chaotic our circumstances are, or despite our desolations, we still have a God that sits high and looks low. And when times like such befalls our ranks in life, we all need to be reminded that God is in it with us. God was in it with Abraham. When God asked Abraham in Genesis 12 to leave all that he had known and to trust God at his word and take him into unfamiliar territory with unfamiliar people to give Abraham an unfamiliar blessing. Didn't God get into Abraham's situation with his barren wife Sarah at the ages of 190? Did God perform a miracle and turn back the hands of time on a thing called fertility? Was it not God who performed a similar miracle with Abraham's son Isaac, who survived the sacrificial test but married a barren woman by the name of Rebecca, who after praying to God for a child, that God gave her double for her trouble? Then God see to it that Jacob, who became a refugee of his own inheritance, fixed his heart and home by wrestling with the angel and not letting God go until the Lord changed his name. Then God get into the pit, the prison, and the palace with Joseph after his own brothers sold him into slavery. I'm trying to tell somebody that God will get in the situation with you. Then God raised up Moses, a wanted murderer, hiding on the backside of a mountain tending sheep, to send him back to the very chaotic situation that Moses ran from, to be the liberator of God's people, to a ruthless leader by the name of Pharaoh. Then God opened up the Red Sea. Then God feed them bread from heaven. Then God give them water to drink from rocks. Then God keep shoes on their feet for 40 years. I'm just trying to tell somebody that God will get in it with you. Then God be with Joshua as he was with Moses and caused Joshua to march around the walls of Jericho until the city became the children of Israel. Then God get into the situation with Naomi and Ruth, who became widows in a famine land, and yet God introduced Ruth to Boaz and took her from rags to riches. I'm just trying to tell somebody that God will get in it with you. Then God see a little shepherd boy tending his father's sheep and raised him to defeat a Philistine giant by the name of Goliath, and then turned around and made that same little boy king of Israel. Will you just look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, God is in it with you? Wasn't God in it with Elijah when he went up against Jezebel and Ahab? Wasn't God in it with Ezra and Nehemiah as they rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem? Then God showed up in a fiery furnace to walk with 3 Hebrew boys in Babylonian captivity. Then God get into a lion's den with Daniel all night long. Then God meet Ezekiel in a valley that was filled with dead dry bones. Then God meet King Hezekiah in his palace and add 15 years to his life. I'm trying to tell somebody at the Sunset Baptist get you. And if God was able, ready, and willing to do it for us, then I declare that the same God is able, ready, and willing to do it for you. God will get into the situation with you. I don't have time to finish the rest of this, but let me just tell you my story about how I know God will get in the situation with you. There was three characters in this particular story. There was a grandfather, there was a mother, and the grandchild. The grandbaby was being taught by the mother. I've shared this before, and she was trying to raise him to be a good child. He's just a toddler. He's a young baby. He's got the age of 2 or 3 years old. He's still assigned to a crib. He's not allowed to get outside of the crib because mom don't want him walking all over the house, getting into any kinds of trouble. She's in the kitchen trying to prepare a meal. She has the baby in the crib, and grandpa's sitting on the couch watching his favorite westerns. Somehow, after time passed, you know what all babies do once they have been confined to a crib and they want to get out of the crib, the baby starts crying. I think I need to park here for just a moment, because some of you have found yourself metaphorically and allegorically in a crib, and you are crying right now that God would get you out of the crib. And here comes the grandfather, after sitting on the couch, can't help himself, his own flesh and blood crying out to him. He reaches over the crib, picks the baby up, goes back to the recliner, sits on the recliner, and resumes watching his favorite Western show. The mama rushes out the kitchen, says, "Now, Daddy, you raised me. Now it's my time to raise my child." Let me park here for a moment. That if you brought a child in the world, that is not your parents' responsibility. They've already raised you. Raise the baby that you made. I've got to get back to where I am. And so the mother says, "I'm trying my best to raise this child. I need you to put that baby back in the crib with all due respect, because he needs to learn how to sit still and mind." The grandfather, very hesitant, walks back over to the crib, puts the baby back in the crib, goes back to the recliner. Y'all know what happened. The baby starts crying all over again. Grandfather is twitching and turning in his seat. He cannot help himself. He looks over in the kitchen, and then back over at the crib, and back into the kitchen, and back over to the crib. Gets out of his seat, walks over to the crib, picks up the baby, and starts patting the baby on the back. The mama run out the kitchen. She said, "Daddy, I've already told you, let him cry. Let him stay in that crib. He needs to learn a lesson." He hesitantly puts the child back in the crib because he wants a good relationship with his daughter and his grandbaby. He says, "I'm not going to interfere. I put the child back in the crib." She said, "Don't take him out the crib again." Daddy said, "I won't take the baby out of the crib again. I know I'm his grandfather. I know I'm your daddy, but I'll listen to you. I won't take him out the crib again." He puts him back in the crib, and y'all know what happened, don't you? The baby started crying all over again. He looks in the kitchen. He looks at the crib. He looks back at the kitchen and looks back at the crib and could not help himself. He got out of his seat, walked over to the crib. The baby has stopped crying. Mother is frying some chicken. She got some greens in the pot, some cornbread in the oven. She has got some yams on the stove. She's trying to get the meal together. Some sweet tea in the refrigerator. She's trying to get it together. But she notices the baby is not crying. And in her mind, she said, "My daddy, that grandfather, has got that baby out the crib again." She comes out the kitchen. She turns the corner, and to her surprise, Daddy didn't take the baby out the crib. He got in the crib with the baby, and he looked at the mother and said, "Now listen to me. You told me I couldn't take him out. You didn't say I couldn't get in it with him. Aren't you glad that we got a God that if he don't take us out of it, God will get in it with us?" I wish I had some help in here, because that baby is you. That mother is Justice, and that grandfather is God.
is crying unto me. There's something about the God we serve. I feel all right now. There's something about the God we serve that when we cry, he hears and please our every groan. Y'all making me work here today. I said, I thank my God that I serve a God who hears my cries. Do I have a witness in here? And sometimes I find myself in pitiful predicaments where I do not see the light at the end of the tunnel. Financial problems, worries on the mind, pain in the body, problems in the family. I find myself in a crib. Do I have a witness in here? And you got your crib, and I got my crib. We all got a crib. But thanks be to God, when we come to sunset, we can lift up our hands and say, Lord, have mercy on me. Do I have a witness in the building? Somebody in here ought to be able to testify that when I cry unto the Lord, he heard my cry. He came to my rescue. And if God, I'm going to bless you with this, if God don't take you out of it, if God don't fix the problem, if God don't heal your body, if God don't give you a new job, if God don't give you a new house, if God don't give you a new honey, if God don't give you more money,